This is Food for Thought with Deborah Walker. Today on Food for Thought, I have Philip Weeks with me, who's one of the leading natural health experts in the UK. And he's a master herbalist, an acupuncturist, a naturopath, and has been working with adults and children for quite a number of years now. He's renowned for his deep understanding and knowledge of Ayurvedic, Arabic, Chinese and Greek medicine, interestingly enough. Author of 2 books, Make Yourself Better and Painful Bladder Syndrome. Welcome, Philip, to Food for Thought.
Hi there.
Now, I love the title of your book, Make Yourself Better. I really do. I feel it's a focus. I feel its focus is totally about putting the responsibility back into the hands of the individual, where I think wisdom around health should be.
Sure, absolutely. And I think that the key thing is, what do we need to do in order to keep ourselves well and get ourselves better if we're not where we need to be.
And you bring ancient wisdom into your work, as we've kind of touched on at the beginning. In fact, I feel it is woven through, and it seems to have been instrumental in the development of your approach. Elaborate on what has influenced your work over the years and how kind of it's progressed to where it is today for me.
I suppose my interest has always been, why is it that some people are well and some people are not well? Why is it that some people can eat, drink, anything they like and be fine and be fit, as in theory, fit at 80 and 90? And why is it that other people have to make an incredible amount of effort just to be well? So that's one of the things that always puzzled me when I began to get into natural medicine. And I began my training as a master herbalist, and I was really interested in the properties that plants have and their constituents and how that can support our health. And then as I delved into that and did my training, I then got really drawn into ancient wisdom. What is it that the ancient peoples have done for thousands of years? What is it that they did in order to keep themselves well and in order to be robust and healthy individuals? So my interest then took me to India. I studied some Arabic medicine. I went into studying Chinese medicine, and these ancient traditions have a storehouse of wisdom that I think that we've lost. We've lost a lot of that wisdom. So although Western medicine has an incredible advantage in treating things like emergencies and accidents, and A&E is an incredible part of modern healthcare. But the focus isn't necessarily on keeping well and being healthy. It's about how do they treat disease. And we've got this incredible rise in chronic disease. And again, Western medicine knows how to deal with acute disease in a very efficacious way, but how do we deal with chronic disease? There's diabetes that's on the rise. There's arthritis. There's all kinds of chronic inflammatory situations. So that's when I really thought, okay, let's look at ancient medicine. What do these traditions have that we need now to integrate?
And you've touched on the Arabic medicine there. Actually, can you explain from my audience what the difference in that would be? Because most of us have heard about Chinese medicine, but actually Arabic medicine.
Well, the thing is that in Britain we had a form of medicine which was based on the 4 humors and the 4 temperaments. And so for example, in Elizabethan medicine, in our ancient tradition in the West, we had this idea of Galenic medicine from Galen, from Greek medicine. And the Arabic world still has this tradition active today. People can do training in these ancient forms of medicine. And that was part of what was the ancient medicine in Europe. So I studied Ayurvedic medicine and Indian medicine, but I wanted to know what was our traditional medicine here, and that links to the Arabic medicine of today.
And what makes it different specifically in regards to, is it specific doctrines? Or?
I think all of it ultimately comes down to some very, very basic principles. And the basic principles are that we're born with a certain level of constitutional health. That means everybody's born with people are robust on a different level. So some people don't need to look after their health and to be well. Other people really need to look after their health in a special way. And these ancient medical systems know that everybody is different. Everybody's different. Everybody has a different capacity within their own health. And so they look at people in terms of this constitutional strength. So, for example, in Arabic medicine, there's 4 types of body types. There's 4 body types, and we look at those 4 body types and work out which one somebody is in order to give appropriate dietary information, the appropriate lifestyle information, and also appropriate herbal prescriptions. In Chinese medicine, there's 5 types of individuals, and in Ayurvedic medicine, there's 3. There's Pitta, Kapha, and Vata. So, but ultimately, they all share this understanding that we can look at an individual as an individual, and we need to make sure that the health information for that person is individualized to them. We can't all eat the same type of food and be healthy. We can't all do the same amount of exercise. We can't all be healthy on the same amount of sleep at night. Everyone is different, and these ancient medical systems allow me to look at a person and be able to assess which one they are in order to really get specific information in order to help them to be healthy.
In many respects, our Western medicine model, which is quite an industrialised way of seeing the body, is starting to catch up with this tailored approach, isn't
well,
it?
It's happening to chronic disease. So, for example, the Western medical model is based on the infectious disease model. It was designed around discovering cholera and malaria and tuberculosis and all these infectious diseases. So when someone has malaria, you need to know, well, do they have it or not? And if they do have it, what's the most effective medicine that's going to treat the most amount of people? Same with cholera or whatever these sort of communicable diseases. So Western medicine is based on that. If somebody is having a heart attack, they're looking at certain statistics, certain vital signs, and there's data that they can see, which means that everybody's treated in a standardized way. That is appropriate for acute disease, in infectious disease, but it doesn't work with chronic disease in the same way. So the Western medical model is based on the infectious diseases, but it's not working for chronic diseases. So now the Western medical model is now looking at, okay, everybody's different. Everybody's got a different genetics, a different predisposition. How do we assess that, and how do we treat it effectively? And so we're kind of coming to, in an interesting kind of way, the same kind of paradigm.
It's interesting because I was talking to Dr. Dan Kuhn, and he's written The Spark and the Machine, and in effect he's marrying both sides of Western and Eastern medicine together, and you can see the overlaps. You can see them getting closer and closer and closer. It is fascinating.
I mean, for example, nutrition. When we think of nutrition is simply applied biochemistry. So that's what it is. You know, when I'm looking at an individual and we do lab tests, so as well as doing these ancient medical diagnostics, like looking at the tongue and taking the pulse and all these other things, I will also run all the lab tests as well and test people's vitamin and mineral levels, and I'm looking for whether the mitochondria is working properly, or whether there's chemicals or toxins that are affecting different important processes with methylation and detoxification. So it's not as if we're looking at it differently, but what will happen is that with Western medicine, they'll go, okay, we'll affect the biochemistry in this particular way, whereas I'm particularly interested in, well, how do we do that nutritionally? Because ultimately, every biochemical reaction that happens in the body is occurring because of the nutrition and what you are eating.
Now, you have the Wheel of Life in your book, and it incorporates all these aspects, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's we can't get hung up on just one aspect of wellness or lifestyle or whatever it might be. For us to be truly well and healthy, we have to have all of these aspects together. So, I talk about the Wheel of Health, and for me, the wheel itself is our body type, our constitution, and the wheel is running on the ground, which is our environment. So obviously, if we're in a very stressful environment, chemically or in a toxic way, or we're in extreme environments, so like the Himalayas or whatever it may be, that will have a certain impact on our constitution. But fundamentally, the spokes of the wheel are, number one, nourishment and nutrition. That's the first thing that we're looking at. What is it that we're eating? It's not everything in health, but it's the fundamental aspect of health. Like I said, if every single biochemical reaction in the body is based on what we're eating, then that needs to be the first thing that we look at as in medicine.
And you refer to it as nourishment, don't you?
Yes,
which I do think is a very interesting way of actually referring to it. In a world where nutrition has become very almost allopathic in the way it's approached nowadays and taught, you've referred to it as nourishment, and I think the language is really important there.
Well, we need foods that aren't just necessarily high in vitamin C or vitamin A or whatever it may be. We need food that's ultimately nourishing for the body, and that's more than just the chemicals and the constituents of the food. It's how the food's prepared. It's everything about the food that affects us. So, for example, in the Ayurvedic world, it's understood that the consciousness of the cook goes into the food when cooking. So the sense is, I learned to cook Ayurvedically in the temples, in Vedic temples, and they're very strict about the kind of things that you're even thinking about when you're cooking. You have to think of certain things. They're either doing mantras or there's certain things. So they're even aware that your consciousness, what you're thinking about, goes into the food. And it's no question of it, isn't it? When you're eating the food that's prepared by your mother or your grandmother, there is something benevolent that goes into the food that you can't get in a vitamin tablet. You know what I mean? You're not going to get it that way. There's something more than just simply the nutrient content. And of course, it's very interesting, isn't it? If that is true, if that paradigm is true, then what does that mean about fast food or food that's prepared by machines?
Absolutely. It kind of puts a whole different perspective on it.
It does, and it takes it away from the personal element. So the consciousness of the cook in Ayurveda is even seen as important.
And when you think about it, if all of your food is produced by machine, then actually, where is that true nourishment? That true nourishment of emotion and spirit,
intent.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the Chinese word for intent is yi, and it's the yi is a spirit of digestion. It means that it's to do with intention. So it's in order to have good food, we need to have food that's with intent, and that's it. So it's, I mean, we can get kind of like slightly metaphysical about it, but it's interesting, isn't it? So I suppose the metaphor is food should be prepared in a thoughtful way, and that might mean the ingredients and the way it's prepared, the food from that's locally available, that's according to time and season. All of that stuff has an impact. So it's a huge, interesting area. But ultimately, we need to eat food.
And it's kind of taken away from that whole, our busyness of life often means that we are not being mindful, even around how we eat it, never mind how we prepare it, never mind how we create it in the first place.
Well, that's right. And if we're not even eating food, then that's a big problem. If we're ingesting things that aren't even food, so if we're eating, things like margarine, or we're eating processed, ingredients that we can't make at home. If we can't prepare something at home and we can't make it at home, we shouldn't be eating it, because it's not something that is near enough to nature that what we need. And it makes sense. We need to eat food that we can prepare ourselves. But when you think of some of the ingredients in food, I don't know, where does it come from? It's extraordinary. So we need to eat food.
I always say to my clients, if you can't pronounce it, you shouldn't be eating it.
It's often the way.
Would you be having that in your cupboard?
Yeah, because you don't even know what it is, and we don't, because we've been taken down a path of industrialization of food. And I understand that on one level, why that happened, but we are now. It's about creating food that will have long shelf lives, food that will be available to people 24/7. Well, good food isn't. Good food often has to be prepared by hand, and that is as important as anything else we can do.
And actually, the biggest factor there is time, isn't it? Because I don't know about you, but when I say to my clients about cooking their own food from scratch, they will do what I did very many years ago when I was worked in the corporate world and was working with my naturopath. I was so, Jean, you have no idea about my life. I have no time to create food. I don't have time to breathe. Never mind do that.
It's a big commitment, isn't it? And I think our lives have become such that we have to make allowances within all that. And I think that but it can be done. It can be done, and it can be done. We can eat simply, and we need to eat communally sometimes, and go to friends' houses and swap, and we need to make provisions in our life where it's doable, and then it's possible. And of course, it's not about being perfect. It's about what you're doing most of the time.
And lifestyle is another aspect of the wheel, isn't it?
Yes. So Nourishment was one of the ones that is obviously the first spoke of the wheel, and then there's lifestyle, and what that means. And lifestyle, I suppose, is bigger. It's quite a big area because it's about routine. It's about how we live our lives with routine. And in ancient medicine, it's understood that we need to live in cycles. So, for example, there's circadian rhythms, which have a natural cycle in our body. We have hormonal cycles. There are, and on a macrocosmic level, the sun goes up at a certain time and goes down at a certain time every day, and we know when there's going to be a full moon and a new moon. So nature has a rhythm, and often what happens is that we become ill because our body and our life lacks appropriate healthy rhythms. So we need to get our bodies back into a healthy rhythm to be healthy. You can't eat your way out of a bad routine. It's not possible. If your routine is all over the place, healthy nutrition is helpful, but it's not going to be enough to be well. And so it's really simple things like going to bed on a regular time every day, and getting up at a certain time every day, and eating at the same time every day. Those factors make such an enormous change to people's health, and it's nothing you can't buy it. You just have to do it.
It's interesting you talk about the basics, because often my clients will say to me, it's just common sense what you're telling me to do. But
common sense isn't that common, right? And we've got to a place where we can get so clever about it. And as a practitioner, as a physician, I'm looking at. So I get into the detail as well. Get the reports. I'm looking at the mitochondria. I'm looking at the Krebs cycle and what's going on, and the methylation, and this is missing, and then looking at all that, and then. Yeah, but are people going to take the supplements? Are they going to do the diet? You have to also look on a bigger level as well. So it's really simple stuff. Yeah. But if you don't do it, it's going to mean it's going to take a long time for people to get well.
It is interesting around the simple stuff. Sometimes my treatment plans can be so simplistic in regards to the, things like drinking the right amounts of water and at the right times, and changing the times of eating, and as you're saying about lifestyle changes. And I look at the plan sometimes and I actually think, can I give that to my client? Particularly when I first started, can I actually give that to my client?
Well, I think the thing is that it's not valued, is it? We don't value. We're the same. As therapists, so we see that we don't value things that are very, very straightforward. But if that's done, if people, for example, eat at a regular time. So, there's something interesting about it. If you eat, I don't know, say lunch at 1 o'clock, and then the next day you eat lunch at 1 o'clock, and the next day at 1 o'clock, and the next day at 1 o'clock. The day after that, at 1:45, your digestive system's getting ready. It knows that in 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever it may be, you're going to eat. So everything starts to get ready and geared up. And then if you don't eat then, your body's going, okay, well, kind of what's going on? So it'll tell you it's hungry. And for whatever reason you might have to ignore that, or you ignore it, and then you eat, and then after about an hour it goes, okay, forget it, I'm going to start reabsorbing. You've had that, right? You've been hungry, and then you've left it for too long, you're no longer hungry anymore. So, and then you eat, and then the body's going, okay, well, now you're eating, and you're supposed to eat before, and then it has to start producing all, appropriate amounts of concentration of hydrochloric acid, and the enzymes are getting ready, and so that is exhausting for the body. That wastes all kinds of our reserves. So we need to be eating, very simply, eating at the same time every day, wherever possible.
And I do think it is interesting around the simple wisdom, because I do think it's become incredibly confusing for people, particularly if they're reading the media and all the nutrition and they are looking to be healthy. I have people who turn up with masses of supplements, masses of they've gone through this diet, that diet, the other diet, and it can be incredibly confusing in regards to what you should be doing at times.
It's confusing. It is confusing, and you just have to go and go into Waterstones and look at the bookshop and look at the area on nutrition, and you go through, and it's just impossible to kind of reconcile the massive differences in recommendations for people's diet. The point is, though, if we're eating a diet that is refined, that is processed, that is denatured, then any kind of diet which involves reducing sugar and eating at the right time and eating whole foods and whatever form that might be is going to make an impact. It's going to make people feel better.
Now you cover off the environment within your Make Yourself Better book, which there's a number of different factors within our environment that actually impact. And what gives you cause for concern specifically?
Well, what happens is that with some patients, I will run tests to assess what actual toxins are in the body. Now, toxin is an interesting word, because toxin is in medical terms is something that the body is producing itself, and like a metabolic toxin. So if you talk to a medic about detoxing, they're not really, and they don't really understand that term, because they see it as the body is naturally detoxing metabolic waste. However, you can get exogenous toxins that are coming from our environment and can get stuck in our body, and they call this bioaccumulation. So we can be exposed to some kind of, say, chemical, and for whatever reason that chemical gets lodged in the body and it doesn't get flushed out naturally through normal elimination. And I test for those, and I find all kinds of things. Commonly I find pesticides, heavy metals. I will find all kinds of formaldehyde will often be in people's bodies, and the tests are so sophisticated now. We can even test if the chemical is actually attached to the DNA itself. We can test for chemicals that attach onto the DNA and affect gene expression. So that's how far it's come with the sensitivity of testing. So sometimes I will test for patients, and we'll find formaldehyde, and it'll be attached to the DNA, and it'll be affecting the way the genes are expressing themselves. So our main object then is to really get rid of that chemical, is to make sure that biochemically we can get it out and actually detox the people of those kinds of chemicals. So I'm concerned about heavy metals. I'm also aware that many people have nitrosamines, and nitrosamine is a chemical that occurs when nitrates are cooked. So nitrates are a preservative that's added into meat, specifically bacon. And when you eat that, when that's heated and eaten, it can cause nitrosamines. And nitrosamine is as a chemical, it is known to be highly carcinogenic. So if I find a nitrosamine in an individual, we have to really get that chemical out of them. There's all kinds of ways we do that, but there's lots of. If we think about the average household, there's chemicals, and people have air fresheners and all these kinds of things. And some people are fine with it. It doesn't bioaccumulate. But some individuals, it really will bioaccumulate and become a problem.
Now, you talk in the book about the difference between food, medicine and poison. What defines them for each individual specifically? Can you just go into that in more detail? Pardon?
Often it's to do with dose.
Go on then.
So, food is something that we will be ingesting that replaces the body, that allows these biochemical reactions to occur. And often food is medicine, yes? We need to be eating certain foods that will restore the body. But sometimes we do need to affect the way the body is functioning, and that's where medicine comes in, which would be in the case of herbal medicine. So, for example, a lot of pharmaceutical drugs are based on herbal medicines anyway. It's the constituents in the herbs which can affect the way the body will work. So it will, for example, if I'm treating, if I have a patient who comes to me and they present asthma or they have difficulty breathing, then from a herbal medicine point of view, to support lung function, we'd be interested in using certain plants. Now, in India, there is a plant called Vasa leaves, and we get this directly from the Himalayas, and it allows people to live at a high altitude without getting altitude sickness, because it increases the body's ability it's a bronchial dilator, so it opens up the bronchioles, you absorb more oxygen into the blood, but it also allows people to breathe more easily in a high altitude area. Well, if you take that medicine, if you take that herb in regular altitude, it will improve lung function. So often nature will create plants in order to combat the diseases and the problems that are occurring locally. So anti-malarial herbs will grow in areas where there is malaria. So I suppose that's when medicine can come in sometimes in order to affect the physiology or the biochemistry in a particular type of way. And then, of course, anything can be a poison. It's all a matter of dosage, really. So, drinking too much water, people drink massive amounts of water, that can be just as much of a problem as dehydration. There was a whole thing about hoo-ha in the news about how much water you're drinking for marathon runners. And there was one particular medic talking about that actually more people die of drinking too much water with running marathons than actually lack of water. So it's all about dosage. It's all about appropriateness, isn't it? And that's what we need to get to common sense, really. That's what we need to go to, what works for us and the patients that we're dealing with.
And we have it in our language, don't we? Where, one man's poison is another man's medicine.
Sure, that's right. And everyone's different. So I think we can't get too fanatic about things are definitely in a certain way. It's just not that straightforward. But we also, at the same time, things can be really simple as well in medicine. So it's kind of both.
Now, you cover off the different body systems in the book, and one of them being the digestive system. I get a lot of clients through with digestive issues. In your perspective, what makes a healthy digestive system?
Gosh, bacteria, good bacteria. Ultimately, the bacteria, the blend, the ratio, the type of bacteria in the gut have such an incredibly profound effect on our overall health. It's just, we're only beginning to understand that. We know that 70% of what the immune system does that in the gut itself. So we can understand that obviously if the digestive system, there is anything going on there that shouldn't, that's going to affect our overall immunity. It's going to affect the overall way the body is working. And what happens with the gut is that once maybe people need antibiotics or they're taking some kind of medication which will affect the type of bacteria in the gut, then all kinds of havoc can go on post those kinds of treatments. So there's a lot of emphasis in the naturopathic world on replenishing good bacteria and testing and making sure that people have the appropriate types of bacteria in their gut, because it has such an incredibly profound effect on people's physical but also mental health as well.
And that's the other side of it, isn't it? The mental health and the spirit and everything.
Sure. We understand that, for example, there was one study that showed that by testing individuals, taking stool samples from different individuals and working and determining which bacteria were present in the gut, they could tell which ones were most depressed and which ones weren't. So it's extraordinary, isn't it? The bacteria could have that impact. And
there's more and more research coming out about all that side of things, isn't it?
It's going to be huge. The next 10 years there's going to be such emphasis on that. We've known that in natural medicine for 1,000 years. There's nothing new. But I suppose it's interesting that science is now kind of showing that there is an importance in gut bacteria, and it's primary for so many things. And
that your whole wheel basically would be affected by the digestive system, wouldn't it?
Yes, it's the key area. People, to be well, we have to work fundamentally on the digestive system, because otherwise what's happening is that the toxins that arise from the digestive processes create a huge metabolic toxic load that then affects the body. It can affect the integrity of the gut. There's something called gut permeability, which you'll know about, where foreign proteins from our food travel through the tight junctions of the gut and can affect and create inflammation. So, and we know that inflammation is fundamental in all chronic disease. In fact, it could be said that all chronic disease is a disease of inflammation. Whether that's Alzheimer's, whether that's diabetes, whether that's arthritis, whether that's psoriasis. I mean, any chronic disease, there will be a level of inflammation. And in order for the body and the immune system to be able to deal with that inflammation, we need a healthy gut. And in order for that, we need a healthy blend of bacteria in our digestive system.
And how would you go about getting that healthy blend of bacteria?
Well, ideally, we get it from food. So primarily, I would recommend people to ingest things like sauerkraut, fermented cabbage, which would need to be made at home. It doesn't work if you buy it from a supermarket because it's pasteurized, so that's not going to work. But you need to make your own sauerkraut. You can get kefir. Also yogurt. I mean, yogurt will have some lactobacillus and different bifidum and different bacteria in it, which are very helpful. But what will happen is that many individuals will not be able to restore all of their gut bacteria in that way because it's been obliterated maybe through certain medication or through certain events that have occurred in the body. So sometimes people do need supplementation, and so every patient gets probiotics in my clinic. That's just a fundamental aspect of what we do, and we've designed our own probiotics from my own research in the clinic. So I'm really into that. That's the first primary thing, but we should be getting it from fermented foods as well. We need both. You need sauerkraut. It's a fantastic way of getting good bacteria into your gut.
And you're coming back again to that how it's important to prepare your own food and make your own food. That's
right. And of course, if you're buying food that's been highly processed, and you're not getting the other kinds of transient bacteria, which actually can be very helpful. So we've become so obsessed with not having any bacteria that we're getting to a point where other illnesses are occurring. So in medicine they're calling it the hygiene theory, where the massive increase in allergies, in anaphylaxis allergies, as well as asthma and eczema, in some part could be related to do with over-sterilization of our environment. So everything is bleached and cleaned, and to the point where there isn't even any beneficial bacteria that we can be ingesting.
That is interesting. I know when I was a child that if you dropped food on the floor or something, actually you picked it up, you wiped it off, and you carried on eating it because food was pretty scarce.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's this phrase, isn't there, that in your life you need a peck of soil, or peck of earth, isn't it? A peck of dirt. There you go. In your life you need a peck of dirt. Now, a peck sounds like a speck, but a peck is a measurement used in baking, and a peck is a lot. I mean, it's like a sack. So there is that understanding that we need bacteria, and I've known children who have spontaneously wanted to eat soil, not just for minerals, but because they're wanting some kind of bacteria in their gut. So that does happen. That does happen. Extraordinary, isn't it? So we need the good bacteria in our bodies, and we need to be dripping that in daily through our diet, and that helps our passive immune system. If 70% of what our immune system does it in the gut, we need the gut to be right for our immune system to be robust and healthy.
Absolutely. Now, that side of drip feeding things then means that effectively it has to be a constant. It's the whole ritual of daily, isn't it? It's not basically as people tend to do it, where they wait till the body breaks down and then they resolve it. Almost like you're patched up, you got back onto the playing field, and then you carry on until the next time you break down, is it? It's not about that.
It's about healthy habits, isn't it? It's about if we can have habits which we're just part of our daily routine or our weekly or monthly routine, which are really, really beneficial. I mean, I spent about a month in China this year, and I went to stay in a Shaolin monastery, and it was a sort of a month sabbatical really, and staying with the monks right in the mountains and seeing, I was doing martial arts and Tai Chi and things like that, and it was very interesting. I saw monks who were 70 old who were still doing the splits, and amazing. Amazing, right? But going somewhere like China, which has gone through this incredible industrial revolution, and there's lots of problems there, huge amounts of problems, but there is some areas left of kind of original culture, and that would be in Tai Chi. You wake up in the morning, and like in Shanghai, there's just thousands of people doing Tai Chi in the morning. Or there, elderly people doing Tai Chi, and they're exercising because they know that health isn't a given. You have to be able to commit into put stuff back into the pot, really. So and incredibly robust and healthy and strong people, and they see, it's so inspirational seeing these elderly people doing Tai Chi every day.
Fantastic. I actually have someone who basically is 92 and absolutely astonishes me. Their cognitive ability is absolutely spot on, hasn't faltered at all.
Amazing.
Yes. And they have lived a very full, happy and very balanced life. They run a very big business and have only just really stepped down from it, and they have had quality food all of their life, and they've made sure that they've been properly hydrated, and they've never really been ill.
Isn't it amazing, those kinds of people? And of course, people's constitution from that generation, they were brought up on organic food. It wasn't like there wasn't a choice. They just primarily had organic food, so they're kind of very robust, aren't they? So those individuals have been through the war and all kinds, and they've been through that austerity. And the austerity of the war meant that people knew, went basically through some quite massive calorific restriction for a number of years. And we know, science, the literature shows that, for example, if you get a rat and you restrict the amount of calories the rat has, it will live longer. But if you give a rat as much food as it wants, it won't live as long. So, I don't know. It's kind of interesting, isn't it, that we've got all this abundance, but we do have to go through periods of, I suppose, cleansing. And on the Wheel of Health, it talks about detoxification and the importance of that, and what we need to do in order to promote this sort of underlying level of health. And the way we do that sometimes is to go through some kind of calorific restriction, and that can be in a number of different ways. I mean, it's kind of become trendy, intermittent fasting, so having a day or 2 days a week of eating less than 500 or 600 calories a day. So there's a number of different ways we can do fasting, but that's a massive part of ancient tradition. So in Arabic, the Ramadan, and in India they have Ekadashi and different things, and so there's all of these different understandings. Lent we have in the culture in Britain, ancient Britain. So we have to go through periods of some austerity. By doing that, it will then give us much more capacity to be well for the rest of our the week or the month or the year, or whatever length we're doing it for.
So it's almost like a reset of the body.
Absolutely, and the research on intermittent fasting is exactly that. If people have got metabolic syndrome, where they've got issues around high blood sugar levels and insulin resistance and all those things, the most effective thing for insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome is intermittent fasting.
Interesting. And you've that whole detoxification and cleansing is quite a big industry now, and I think that because there's an industry around it, some of it is very, very unclear around what the benefits of it in many respects. Just talk about detoxification in more detail, because the bacteria is very important as well.
Definitely. I mean, you've got one extreme, which is some scientific lobbies will be saying detoxification's all hogwash and don't bother, your body does it anyway. And then you've got the other side of it, when you've got look at functional medicine and the research about that actually, no, you actually do have to get some of these chemicals and toxins out of you. So we've got a very wide, diverse sort of understanding of what detoxification is. And people think, oh, I'm going to go on a 3-day juice fast or a 3-day detox. People talk about detox. Oh, I'm going to avoid coffee for a week. I mean, that's great, right? I mean, any step towards being healthier is great, but that's not really a detox. You're just having an absence of something that's potentially stressing your body. So that in itself is not a detox. You need to detox primary things going into your body, and for that to happen, you need good bacteria in your gut, because your gut bacteria will digest all kinds of things. It will digest plastics and heavy metals and PCBs, and your gut bacteria is responsible for detoxifying all kinds of industrial, chemical, as well as metabolic toxins that are produced in your body. At the same time, we need to be putting in nutrients which help us detoxify. So if somebody, for example, doesn't have enough vitamin B12, it's going to affect something called methylation, which is your body's ability to detoxify certain things. So you do need appropriate nutrition as well as absence of stuff that's toxic in order for your body to go into detoxification mode. But one of the most important things for detoxification is fat. You need fat. We need the right kinds of fat. And that's a huge debate about what kinds of fats we should be having. But we need appropriate, good quality fat in order for our body to detoxify chemicals and toxins that have latched onto different areas in our system.
And that's because they lodge in the fatty tissues, isn't it?
Absolutely. So the most toxic chemicals, most toxic substances are fat soluble. They're not water soluble, because if they were water soluble, you'd be peeing them out, you'd be getting rid of them anyway, part of our detoxification. It's fine. It is the fat soluble toxins which are the ones that are the most insidious and toxic. And a lot of heavy metals, for example, will go to where the fat is, and it will go to nervous system tissue as well, because that's where fat is. It will go to the lobe of the liver, because that's where our reserves of vitamin A and vitamin D are stored. So, these toxins will go where the fat is. And of course, every cell membrane is essentially, simplistically, made of fat. So we need good quality fat to protect the cells, to protect the organs. And once we put good fats in, the body will often begin a process of detoxification, because it's got all the fundamental ingredients to make the detoxification happen.
So the 3-day detox that you get in a box won't quite do that. I hate to say to some people,
just not going to do it, is it? It's not going to do it. I mean, any step. The only good thing, one of the good things about that is that people do 3 days. And often if they're coming off coffee, they'll feel wretched because it's rough, isn't it? Drinking coffee, come off. It's pretty intense. But some people really go, actually, for 3 days I've kept off all that stuff, I'm taking these things, I'm starting to feel some change. So that's great. It's a really encouraging thing to begin to detox. But it's not going to be enough for getting rid of, aluminium or something that's in the body. It's not going to sort of do it.
Now, you delivered a presentation at the Western A Price conference recently about a topic that's very close to my heart, and that was about adrenal exhaustion and tiredness.
Okay.
And we've got an epidemic of chronic fatigue in our society. What do you think the main causes of it are?
Wow.
I know. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so chronic fatigue is a really huge area, and yes, people are more tired than ever. I see grandparents saying to me, why is it that I've got more energy than my grandchildren? You just mean, and my children, why is that? What's going on? And they notice that. Yeah. Sort of older people, that there is wisdom there, and they're noticing their children are not robust in the way they were when they were younger. So yes, there is a change going on. With something like chronic fatigue, often what will happen is that people will have a virus. The usual suspects are things like glandular fever or something like that, mononucleosis or Epstein-Barr. So they'll have a virus, and then their system will never fully recover from that virus. So from then on, there is a sort of a level of fatigue that is being caused by the fact that somebody had a huge virus and they haven't really thrown it off completely. So that's one level of chronic fatigue. The other level is that people are toxic and not eating enough good nutrition. So they're eating food which is no longer sustaining their mitochondria, which is the battery in each cell. And we test for that, and we can tell. We can do a blood test, and you can tell that people are fatigued because their mitochondria function is poor. So you've got that. You've got another paradigm where people have experienced so much stress that then it is depleting towards their body. And what happens is hormonally, things don't recover. So people go into and it's been the phrase has been coined adrenal fatigue, where the adrenal glands are not potentially producing enough hormones because it's been burnt out. Essentially, I suppose the metaphor is, you've done too much, you're now burnt out, you're running on empty, you can't do any more, and therefore you're tired. So there's a lot of different paradigms with chronic fatigue, but if we talk about the adrenal sort of paradigm for a moment, then with that, what is happening that we're experiencing stress in a way that we've never experienced in the history of mankind in the last 100 to 150 years. We've never experienced stress before like this. We've had, in previous times, there will be an event that occurs and we will get the surge of different chemicals into our system, the adrenaline, it's fight and flight. Then we get out. So, for example, there's a stimulus we're in danger. We get the injection into our body from our adrenal glands of adrenaline, which gets us out of the area. We then get the cortisol, which helps us to be vigilant and make sure that there's nothing else going on that's dangerous. The cortisol also temporarily helps us to prevent us getting any infections, so that we're not ill as we're kind of trying to get away from the threat. Then those chemicals are gradually detoxified as the threat passes, and then we go back to normal. What is happening in sort of the modern world is that we often will experience our lives as a continual threat. So it might not be that we are being chased by a tiger, but we might be going into work, dealing with stressful people, moving house a lot, different relationships, divorcing, whatever it may be. And because of the way that our lives are now, we interpret those events as continually dangerous and stressful. And there's only so much we can cope with that before the body goes, you know what, I've had enough.
And also what I experienced when I had it was that in the end it could be the smallest of things that would send me into a spiral. So it didn't have to be even stressful. It could be slightly emotional, and it would send me into a spiral.
The brain, absolutely, the brain doesn't notice any difference, right? It doesn't notice whether it's emotional stress or physical stress or mental stress. Biochemically, we respond in the same way. We often think that sort of stress is some kind of psychological thing. It is. There is an element of that, but somehow we're making it up, or we're viewing things in a way that is somehow wrong. Well, possibly, but when we feel stressed, it's a biochemical thing. We can do saliva tests and blood tests. We can test for that. We can see that people are experiencing chemical changes, biochemical changes, which is a sign of stress. So it's not just how the body interprets physical stress will be very similar to how the body experiences emotional stress. It all becomes part of the same thing. So we will start to experience these events and our environment or people or whatever it may be, and biochemically the body will be responding in the same way. And so it becomes then a physical thing, a physiological event that's occurring in the body.
How can this be such a little-known syndrome? Because that is the subheading of your actual article that you've written on it as well. Yeah. I find that absolutely fascinating that that's the case.
Well, I think the thing is at the moment, where we are with something like adrenal health is that there are very big extremes. So if people have, for example, Addison's disease, people have an autoimmune disease where the body attacks the adrenal glands and it doesn't produce cortisol anymore. Cushing's disease as well as another adrenal disease. So this is a paradigm that shows, okay, you are chronically, you are dangerously short or have too much of a specific adrenal hormone, and therefore it's life-threatening. It has to be a hormone that has to be replaced medically. But through what people are sort of understanding, that there is a continuum between adrenal health and something like Addison's disease, and this is sort of the sort of more nebulous area. And we can do saliva tests and work out, for example, if people are producing too much cortisol or not enough cortisol, and that can be a way of assessing people. But at the moment, the continuum isn't being particularly studied or researched in a medical sense. However, the papers on the level of cortisol and the effect of cortisol on health are becoming. There's a lot more research based on cortisol and the effect on health. I think we'll get there. We'll get to a point where people will recognise something like adrenal fatigue as a reality. We're just not there yet.
Yeah. Now, it does tend to happen to a certain type of person, doesn't it?
Sure. Well, I mean, what can happen is that it's related to all kinds of factors, but often it will be the people that, the A-type personality, the types of people who are very much very driven. They might have high histamine levels in the body, for example. They may be the type of people who may be perfectionist, want to get things right. Often the doers are people that get things done in the world, to be honest. It's important. So those people often are overextending themselves, and they're the people that often crash. So the classic type of person may be somebody who's working, say, for example, in the city or something like that, and they're working 20 hours a day and not sleeping enough and not eating very well and all that kind of thing. And there's a point where the body goes, you know what, enough's enough. And therefore then they can't function. They're in bed, and I see many patients like this where they are burnt out and therefore they can't even function anymore. This is a reality for a lot of people.
Yeah, and you say that there are some who really can't function anymore. What are the types of symptoms that you tend to see linked with this then?
I mean, what I'll see is people who have gone through all the medical tests, and the doctor say, well, we don't find anything wrong. You haven't got chronic heart disease or anything. We don't understand why you can't get out of bed, or if you exert yourself more than 10 minutes, that you're fatigued or you're sweating or you're tired. And they're the people I see that have gone through all those medical testing. They've got no organic disease that can be detected, but they are exhausted. They're running on empty, and they can't overstretch themselves. They are people who will be chronically fatigued. They'll often have symptoms that, like fibromyalgia and muscle fatigue, that if they do too much, then they're in bed for a few days. They're overwhelmed. Stimulus, for example, like too much light or too much noise, will have a profound effect on them. And it's a really, really difficult situation that some people are in with this kind of thing.
Yeah, it is fascinating with the noise, because I actually couldn't listen to anything. I couldn't listen to any music for a long, long time without it driving me absolutely nuts. Because
what's happening is that the body is trying to shut down from any kind of stimulus. Yeah. So it's trying to, if related to the cortisol levels as well in the body. So essentially it's wanting you to withdraw from stress, basically, from any, and everything can be potentially stressful, and the body just shuts down. It doesn't want anything. And I mean, a lot of people find too much auditory stimulation too much. So as people recover, that changes, and as they get better, that changes. But there has to be an active therapeutic process with these kinds of people in order for them to get better. And things like graded exercise is not going to do it.
I knew I was getting better when my neighbour started to complain about my music being too loud.
It's a good sign. It's a good sign, Debbie.
But most people, and now I wasn't one of these, but most people turn to stimulants in a variety of forms to keep themselves going. But actually, these can make the condition worse rather than better, can't they?
Sure. I mean, the classic thing is that people have one coffee in the morning, which I think is, has its, nutritional benefits, but then to keep going, they'll have like 2 coffees and 3 coffees and 6 coffees, and they're drinking coffee at night to keep up to to study and whatever it may be, or to work, and then people use other kinds of stimulants as well. So this then creates a situation where you are flogging a dead horse, in a sense. You're trying to create a situation that's unsustainable, and therefore at one point the body will say no.
So let's come back to that word nourish again. How do we nourish ourselves back to health when we've got ourselves in that condition?
Yeah, in that kind of situation, then people need to be off all kinds of refined foods. Sugar is the big problem, so they need to come off sugar. They need to eat a diet that's low in glycemic load or index. They need to nourish themselves with the appropriate amount of fat. They need saturated fat. Of course, hormones are made from fat. So we need enough saturated fat because that's what hormones are made from. And of course, cortisol is a hormone. We need enough nutrients. Specifically, we need antioxidants because that helps the body relate to the mitochondrial function. So we need high nutrient dense foods. People then need to get out of the habit of reacting in a stressful way. When you have been traumatized, so for example, working with patients who have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, their body is in a situation where, and their psyche, where they will automatically react as if there is a huge amount of stress occurring at any one time. So that needs to be reprogrammed. In a sense, there's things that can be done that helps people come away from this of reacting to things in a very, very extreme fight and flight way. So it's nutrition, it's routine. People who have got adrenal fatigue have to be fastidious about routine until they get to a point where they're much better.
Absolutely fascinating. Now, if you were to give, rather than for the adrenal piece, but in general though, if you were to give some advice in regards to how you start to move your health back into a level of balance, where would you start?
So the first thing is routine. So getting up at the same time every day, trying to go to sleep at the same time every day. Do not use bright screens before you go to bed. You need 2 hours. So if you're looking at an iPad or something, you need 2 hours after that before you really go to sleep, because then it affects and disturbs melatonin levels. So people need to be aware of bright screens before they go to sleep. You need 2 hours to detoxify the effects. They're calling it in medicine sleep hygiene.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's number one thing. You need restful sleep. Because if you don't rest, you're not going to be well. So routine and avoiding bright screens. Nutrition, start eating good food in the sense of having appropriate, good saturated fat. We're all a fan of butter here, so I prescribe butter to my patients, or coconut oil is an alternative possibly to butter, and then good bacteria, getting the good bacteria into the body. So they're the three things we start with: sleep, routine, getting good fats into the body, and getting good bacteria in there as well.
Philip, I cannot express how much it's been my pleasure today to interview you on Food for Thought. Can you give out your contact details for those who wish to come and see you?
Absolutely. You can contact me. The clinic is philipweeks.co.uk, and you can have a look on the website, and you can contact the office, and my admin will help people if they want to come and see me as a patient or learn about my books or my lectures or whatever it may be.
And you do have a waiting list, don't you? So people need to get on sooner than later.
About 3 months at the moment, so yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Take care.